All right, guys. Looks like we got our live stream set up. This is going to be probably just a little bit different than what I've done in the past. And if you, just in case you haven't pulled this up on your computer screen, in case it'll be useful for you, this is basically what I see on mine when you go to the Secretary of State's website here, and you actually get a chance to see what the election results will be. So this is, if you kind of look at this, it'll be kind of right down here. This is what it'll look like. And right now, you're going to find that there's nothing on the November 4th, 2025 general election results yet, because they are going to post here at 8 o'clock, and it's about 7:30 right now. So in about 30 minutes, assuming they don't have a computer botch up or they have other problems. But historically, some of the counties will start posting right at 8, and usually most of them are up by 8:30. So we should have a reasonable sense, at least the first stage of the election, where things are at if you are looking at that part on your computer. And then what I want to do here is pop on my Q&A here. And just a quick reminder, if you want me to see your questions, it's a little bit easier if you hit @WeTheGoverned. And I will do my best to answer any of the questions that you throw my way. It's no guarantee that you're going to like the answer, but at least hopefully we can get the be able to do my best to respond to you. So, and I'm hoping that I'm not having any technical problems here. Yeah, there it is. Okay, good. So I think we're good to go here. As a real quick just update, we are going to be, the reason why, again, I set today's live stream at 7:30 instead of at 6 o'clock is because the Secretary of State, when they post up their initial results. Now, the one thing to remember for those who don't know about the joys and wonder and glory of all mail-in voting, like what we have in Washington State, typically what happens is each of the 39 counties, they'll have been counting ballots all day, and their initial posting of whatever the vote level turnout numbers and results, you got to remember they're probably only going to be posting, typically it'll be about half of the ballots total that they end up getting, because remember, they're going to be trickling in for the next 3 to 4 weeks. And so you don't really get a great sampling of what the results are. If it's really close, you can't really tell for sure where the election is going to end up. So we may be just looking at some initial ballot counts, and it would be like the equivalent in states that run real elections or a normal election system where they can finish it in one day. It'd be like knowing what the result is halfway through the day, kind of equivalent. Now, it is statistically significant. Typically, what happens is if the election results aren't, if there's a 10-point difference or something like that, you're not probably closing that gap with the late mail-in ballots, unless you're Kashama Sawant out of Seattle. So generally, whatever the election results are, they're a pretty good indication. If the gap's pretty large, it's going to be unlikely that you're going to see much in the way of closure there. If the gap is really close, you have no idea for sure who's going to win. And that's why I say we have election month, actually about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, depending on when you count the start of the election season. I usually count it when they start to, the earliest county sends out the ballots, and then it doesn't really finish until it's certified in Washington State. So, or at least until they can count the last one. So a quick update before we jump into some of the national elections, most of which I'm assuming anybody who's logging on tonight's kind of wonkish and familiar with the election. You probably follow election stuff generally. And so I don't mind going over a couple of the national elections, and feel free to throw any kind of questions at me in the comment section down below, or depending on what type of, wherever that is. I'm going to show you what it looks like on my screen. So this is what I'm seeing when people are posting questions up. As you see, Jason's question right there is a lot easier for me to spot out of the mix, because he put @WeTheGoverned, so that's why you want to do that. But I'll start going in here and going into the comment questions, mostly questions I'm hoping that you send my way. And I would guess that tonight, if you want to stay live streamed, and I don't completely put you to sleep tonight, then feel free to stay on as long as you want. But I do kind of anticipate pretty much wrapping it up unless it's just an amazing series of issues that we're covering. I'm hoping to be completely wrapped up with the live stream tonight by 8:45-ish, maybe a little bit later, give or take. If there's some problem with the results, maybe it'll go a little bit longer, but that's my plan. The other thing I was going to go over real quick, if you are in King County, Eastern King County, Thursday, November 6th, I'm going to be at Remlinger Farms, I believe, and this is for a Doge training class. I believe this is one sponsored through the King County Republicans out there. Registration is going to start around 5:15. Program starts at 6. I'm usually done by about 8, but I stay around and answer anybody's questions for as long as you have them. November 8th, if you're out there at Port Orchard, I know there's a kind of a freedom training event, and last I checked, it was mostly younger people that were doing how to set up and promote communication to the public. But I'll be out there in the afternoon that Saturday, November 8th. I'm doing a presentation on Wednesday, November 12th at the Whatcom County Business Club. I believe that's down there on the harbor at Esqualcom, and I'm doing a noon event out there. Tentatively, I know we've discussed doing a Doge training class while I'm at Whatcom, but I don't know that we've set up the details on that, and I apologize because if we did, it could be that they've already set up something and I just don't quite know about it yet. If you live in Eastern Washington and you're anywhere near Clarkston, November 19th, I will be out there for a Doge training class. That's Wednesday. It will be starting at 6. But registration, again, it's usually better to get there around 5:30, so you get there early. And I just had somebody send me the address out there in Clarkston where I'll be going, and I will read it off here. Let's see. I know that somebody had sent this earlier to me today, and so I was just making sure. It's called Hell's Canyon Resort Marina, and that's 1560 Port Drive, Clarkston, Washington, 99403. So out there by the Idaho border, that'll be the Doge training class in Asotin County on the Wednesday, November 19th. I do have other events after that, but that's as far out as I'm going to go. So let's jump into a few of the questions here. As we know that the election results will start posting on the Washington State Secretary of State website in about, what are we looking at? So about 25 minutes or so. And the link to that, if you don't have it, I did put it in the comment section up above. You can see where I provide the direct link if you don't already have it. And it's kind of helpful to be looking at it while we're going along here. Let me jump right into some of the questions that people are sending me. There's a question from Claire Nevald asking, we the govern, should Seattle Mayor Bruce Harold lose his position in tonight's race, is there a possibility new mayor might welcome a federal probe in mishandling of drugs and cartels in August? No, the answer is no. If Wilson wins, because Harold would lose in that case, no. She's going to do everything she can to protect the drug cartels and drug dealers and every bit of corruption in the city. So that the Seattle mayor race isn't a question of good guy, bad guy, right? It's bad guy and then horrific woman. So that's kind of the choice that the top two primary system earlier this year produced. I would generally vote for Bruce Harold, as bad as he is and as terrible as he'll be, only because the other person's completely nuts. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. So that's going to be a crazy race, I think. Let me just start looking at some of these other questions. And I understand you mentioned, and this is the same person who asked that question, I only bring this up as recent events in Massachusetts uncovered a similar issue involving drugs, cartels, and Maura Healey's aide being the alleged culprit. Yeah, that's a good point. You're right. The out in Massachusetts, the aide was actually arrested for being a drug dealer. In Washington State, we usually reward people like that, especially if they're in government. So I don't see them doing any kind of investigations like that here. I mean, after all, as long as you're a Democrat, you can break into the state capitol, set a fire right in them, and do massive amounts of vandalism. And heck, they aren't even going to charge you with arson. So burning down the Capitol, as long as you're a Democrat, is totally okay. They don't want to charge you with arson for that. So my guess is that either one of those people probably isn't going to make a big change. in what the feds do. Now, I'm going to point out the federal government's not beholden to the city of Seattle in whether they enforce federal law. And so that's the one thing I could kind of see that the Trump administration and ICE, as they're kind of building up some of the deportation efforts and cracking down, they have been cracking down more on the Sinaloa drug cartel in Washington State in the last 7 months than they did in the previous 4 years. So I anticipate that could be some very interesting things here. Janice C. Why did the Washington State refuse to give the voter rolls to the Trump administration? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I did answer this in one of my previous videos. But very specifically, in theory, the person who would be handing over those rolls to be compliant with federal law is Secretary of State Steve Hobbs. Now, what he tried to do is split the baby by handing over the publicly available database anybody can pull out of the and get as a part of a records request through the Secretary of State's office. But there's 2 columns in there that, of course, he concealed from the feds. One is the Social Security. It's the last 4 digit, actually, of the Social Security number associated with that voter ID. And the other one is driver's license information. They don't provide that. Now, you and I couldn't get that information, and for good reason, because of the ID theft problem that would come along with it. But bigger than that, those were specifically requested by the feds. So I would anticipate that we'll be just like the other 9 states that have already been sued by the Trump administration. Washington State will be one of them they get to. They seem to be suing them in order. So I'd anticipate that they file a lawsuit against us pretty soon. And your original question is, why did they do this? Well, this is a good question. If you were trying to be transparent, which nobody at the Secretary of State's office is, and certainly no Democrat who's in any position of power wants to be, then why would you hide the Washington State voter rolls from the feds? Because mainly what the feds are going to do is they're going to cross-reference it with the SAVE vote. It's the SAVE database, which is really going to mainly identify people who are in the country illegally, but they're registered to vote. The other category, as I mentioned in my other videos, are people who are here legally as non-U.S. citizens, but they're also registered to vote. And you're going to find a number of other things mixed into that. You're going to find duplicate voters who are registered to vote in other states as well, which we have usually hundreds in Washington. Actually, at this point, it'd probably be closer to thousands. Doesn't mean they're actually voting in multiple states, but it means there's something wrong. You aren't supposed to be registered to vote in a whole bunch of states simultaneously, so you do need to pull. That's one of the ways that you clean up your voter rolls. And there's going to be other issues that they're looking at, but the big and the instant easy stuff is just removing the non-U.S. citizens from the voter rolls. And Washington State's been handing out driver's licenses like candy for 30 years, and apparently recently handing out commercial driver's licenses, specifically and primarily appears to people who can't pass a driving test, can't speak English, don't know how to drive a truck, and like to run over people wherever they drive. So, and possibly hit bridges. We don't know yet. But regardless, that's going to be why. And the Secretary of State doesn't want to reveal this. Bob Ferguson doesn't want to reveal this. None of the Democrats want to reveal this because the sanctuary state laws in Washington protect non-U.S. citizens at the highest priority. So drug cartels, violent criminals, they got to protect those people. Hands off our criminals. That's who the Democrats really want to protect more than anything else. And the last thing they want to do is reveal the fact that they're all in here registered to vote, or they have ID, or they're doing SNAP benefit fraud, or whatever it is. So we will see. Nighthawk Sim. So how come it takes a month for counties to finalize the results? And that is an excellent question. Let me get into that a little bit because it's more than... so if you are a normal jurisdiction, or let's just say you went back before the days of electricity, and before good roads and everything else. Washington State, back at statehood, say in the late 1800s, we could count and resolve an election on the same night same day the election was held. However, with all the modern technology and tools that we have now with mail-in voting, that's impossible because we allow ballots to be trickled in through wherever the U.S. Postal Service happens to have stashed them that week or last month, and we allow them to trickle in for weeks after the fact, so long, in theory, as they have the the postmark on it indicating that it was received before Election Day. Again, I say in theory because we got some problems with the post office. So there's no chain of custody. It's the dark black box secret sauce system that it just goes out into the ether, and hopefully it's not stolen by the postal carriers or other people doing ID theft operations, stealing from the mail. And so assuming it survives all that, it'll get back to the auditor's office, and then they'll count it. So it's not really their fault specifically because our state allows it to trickle in for weeks. Now, you can set it up in even an all mail-in system where the ballot has to be received by Election Day. And I'm going to back up for a second, and I should double check the stats on this, but this is a publicly available stat. Last I checked it a couple days ago. I did notice that about 44% of Washington state voters weren't trusting the post office, and they were going and using either the drop boxes or they were handed in directly at the auditor's office. So in truth, 40 some odd percent of the voters are delivering their ballots that way. But the real main reason is it just takes that long to collect all the ballots. And what will typically happen in these auditors' offices, and this is not irrational, this is just what ends up happening. They know that these ballots are going to keep trickling in, and so they don't count every day. They'll count usually on Election Day. That'll be the big turn-in here in about 15 minutes. And at least that's when they'll start reporting from some of the counties. And then what they'll do is they'll do a count usually the next day, because usually there's a bunch of ballots that show up on Election Day, so that's the lion's share. So they need to count those the next day. And then they'll be kind of trickling in. And so rather than have the employees work little shifts each day, what they'll do is they'll let the ballots kind of pile up, and then they'll count in 4 days, say. And all counties are different because it depends on the volume. And so what ends up happening is you get these spikes of results over the next 3 weeks. And so it's funny, I don't know that people realize how unusually weird that is, that we have that type of a system, because for instance, India can count more ballots now they do it over 3 days, but they can count more than the entire population of America in 3 times as much, I think, the population of America, and they can do that in just a couple days, right? And Florida obviously is able to count far more ballots than Washington State ever provides, and they do it in 1 day. Big states run by competent systems and with a rational, logical approach to voting, they're able to do it in 1 day. Once you've gone down the road of this mail-in nebulous system, then it just drags out longer. And this isn't to be confused with 2 other things that delay certification of an election. And the reason why they don't have the certification for a number of weeks is they allow, and this is true everywhere, they allow a reasonable amount of time for challenged votes, where election observers or political parties or something are challenging some aspect of the election, and they give the respective canvassing boards or the entities in the various states that take care of the equivalent dispute resolution, they give them enough time to resolve all that stuff so that all those issues are resolved by the time it officially goes up and gets certified. In most states, it's about a month after the election, give or take. It could be a week earlier, it could be a week later. When there's federal elections, they're a little bit more strict on it, but nevertheless, that's how it works, roughly. And I'm fully aware it's a little bit more complicated than I'm telling you, but I'm hoping that that's giving you at least some accuracy as to what's actually going on here. Lancelot Dufresne, here's a question from you. Results, dare we consider honesty? Honesty is always possible, but we'll see. And I saw some of the other comments from some people, and they're referencing Florida here earlier, and you're absolutely right. Jason Fisher, evening, Glenn. The current mayor is bad, but he did put efforts in rebuilding SPD. Will she flush that down the drain and push to defund who would apply to SPD now? I don't know. I mean, we're electing somebody who's never really had a productive job in society before. And I'm sorry, what Jason's referring to is the mayor of Seattle. So, and the mayor's race. And so, depending on if Bruce Harrell's not getting it in and the crazy lady's going to be in instead, it's anybody's guess. She's just going to be a puppet. So it's going to be whatever she's being told to do. That's what she'll do. And she has no background that indicates she's ever held a productive job in her life. And so there's no way to really predict. Usually you want to elect people with some kind of a background, but if you think that way, you're obviously not a progressive. So what you have is, a terrible mayor and with a corrupt, crazy socialist. Who knows what she's going to do. But again, sometimes we do elect really bad, terrible people, and they don't do as much damage as you think they might. And part of it's just that they have to run into the inertia and bloat of the bureaucracy, just like a good reformer would. And they also have to sometimes deal with the reality of math, which they usually deny most of the time, but eventually it catches up to you. And just for clarity's sake, most jurisdictions are in this country, but particularly in Washington state, are suffering from a budget projection up here, champagne tastes, with a beer level of taxes that are coming in. And it's falling off the cliff. None of their projections are going to be accurate, especially up in Seattle. And so probably most of the time she's going to have grandiose, elaborate dreams of socialist sugar plums and things that she wants to hand out. And there just won't be the money there for it. And the bureaucracy is going to fight because there's fiefdoms that are going to be arguing over the budget. Will she reduce the effectiveness of the SPD? I think that's a reasonable forecast, but I don't really necessarily know what that means because even when you're trying to make good reforms in government, it's hard enough, and it's very possible that the factions that appear, if you're a Republican, you think, well, there's no faction, everybody's in lockstep, but that's not an honest assessment of a large group of people and a large bureaucracy with lots of special interests. And lots of grant grifting operations, right? The music's running out. They're going to have to stab each other in the back for the money. And so a lot of that drama will get out there and be involved in this, I think. Greg McHenry, the elections usually take as long as it takes, the Democrats, to find enough votes to win, right? And that's always been one of my arguments, one of the reasons why I don't like the lack of chain of custody with the mail-in voting system, because it opens up the door to all kinds of bad outcomes. Now, it's not a perfect cheating system for those who want to manipulate it. And I can say that because there's oftentimes, with my sources inside the lefty weird world over there, sometimes they get surprised by election results themselves. And those things happen for a variety of reasons. I will point out, too, though, this is also the first election that's been held since the Trump administration's been in office. And for the first time since anybody watching this video has been alive, the feds are actually starting to pay attention to elections in Washington state. It is literally the first time. And with Harmeet Dillon in there in that division of the attorney generals or the AG at the federal level in the Department of Justice, I would believe that there's a lot more attention being paid to the elections here. And they don't know, they being the people who might be wanting to do bad things in these various counties, especially King County, they don't know what they're looking at and what they're already aware of. So there may be a little bit less. One of the theories that is out there right now for the low level of voter turnout is that some of that might be because some of the more corrupt opportunities that could be taken advantage of, maybe there's fewer of them operating right now. I don't know that that's an accurate assessment, but it's possible. Let's see. DeSantis, this is Mega Triumph 1. DeSantis has a proposal for 2026 for the voters to vote on no property taxes, and that'll be voted on in 2026. Okay, I've seen a couple of these around out there. The most realistic one is actually out of South Dakota, and I do think this is a trend, and I think Washington State's going to fall into this at some point in time, where the corruption of the property tax system is going to eventually catch up with them, and there's going to be some reform coming. It's easier when that happens from other states, but we'll see. To be honest, though, of the there's 8 states that they usually publicly say, well, we're going to get rid of property taxes. Some of them are slowly moving in that direction, but if you notice, none of them have eliminated it. But South Dakota is the one that's actually furthest along with a proposal that is, by the way, not driven by the Republican Party in their legislature. It's not because of the Republican Party, it's because of citizens that actually organized it and drafted it, and it looks like it has some potential. I was going to follow up. I should have followed up with some of those activists to see how close they are, but I'd followed up with some of them a little while ago. Let's see. Let's see. Here it is. People are just giving commentary. It looks like there's some questions down here, and I want to jump to your questions more than the commentary, as much as I appreciate it. So let's get to some questions. Whoa, there's a whole bunch here, and I am going slow. And election results are not going to be published for 7 minutes, so let's see what we can get. Lancelot Dufresne. Can we hope for change based on the mail-in corruption? Yes, hope is always eternal and it springs eternal, but it takes more than hope. One of the problems that we oftentimes have with reform elections or oftentimes Trump voters for lack of a better clarification, is that they vote for Trump and then they go home and forget that there's an election for another 4 years or potentially forever. And so that extra turnout and motivation that those people would have, they aren't attaching that same level of motivation to these local elections. As pathetic as the microscopic amount of work that it takes to actually vote, some people view it as a tremendous burden. And so they don't want to spend that time literally just sticking it in the mail, of course, or maybe a little extra energy if you care about your vote to go down and drop it off in the drop box. But that's just too much work for some people, apparently. And so the turnout numbers don't indicate that there's a big push and drive by conservatives to necessarily come out. But there's going to be some local variation, and we'll have to look at it. Let's see, Jason Fisher, when will we see the results for California Prop 50, and is it pretty much a done deal? The surveys indicate that the redistricting proposal, the California redistricting proposal, which is the Prop 50 down there, that the California has the same screwed up system we have sort of in elections. And so I would anticipate like an initial number tonight. If it's more than 5 points ahead, it's probably going to prevail, but the surveys show it prevailing, and so we'll see what happens. Let's see, Sayao 2001. If you live near Linwood, I'm a barber cutting for 13 years, and I'd love to cut your hair. Well, if I have a terrible haircut, it's okay if you tell me. No ego here, but darn it, I'll have to drive all the way up to Linwood and get my hair cut next time. I have to admit, I don't pay much attention to that stuff. I just get a cut when it's annoying me and it's gotten too long. Let's see. My county did catch one dead, okay, Wolf Lord. My county did catch one dead person voting and didn't let the ballot through. Congratulations. Most of the time, that actually does get through. Which county are you in, by the way? This is Wolf Lord, so tell me somewhere down here, because I do want to know. I noticed that King County caught, they caught, I think, 9 last year. 9 dead people, people voting after death. I know there's probably more to life after death than just voting, but in King County, it's kind of an important thing. And they surprisingly caught them, but what I don't like right now is that the auditor's offices are concealing that information, or they're making it a lot harder to find. If you're a total inside wonkish person, you can get that information. And this does remind me with some of my voter integrity people, especially you observers out there that are doing the Lord's work, paying attention to what's going on. I do want to circle back around and do a story on the people who are voting after death. Usually it's the family member voting past the grave for the people who died, but they rarely do anything. I mean, they'll catch them sometimes, but there's usually stuff that gets through, of course. Let's see. The last video from We the Governed, and this is from PH Joy, explains a lot. There is little incentive for the state to admit fraud. Thank you. And that's really the video I think I launched this morning. That's the one having to do with SNAP EBT benefits. And really it relates to all federal programs the state administers, usually through DSHS, and it has to do with their fraud. In order for a state to be qualified enough to hand out federal funds, the state has to promise the feds and prove or demonstrate that they have some kind of a fraud detection process and enforcement process to reduce fraud in federal programs. So what Washington State does is we defund that part of the program. We don't fill those seats. We have a theoretical model that exists there, and we underfund them, don't support them, create software programs to make it look like there's nothing happening. And we have an incentive to do that if you're in the bureaucracy, because every dollar of fraud that's identified and that's identified in that process, that's $1 less that the state gets from the feds in the next check. And so it reduces how much money the bureaucracy gets to hand out. And so there's no incentive to detect fraud. In fact, there's every incentive to pretend like it doesn't happen. And that is what's going on. Let's see, Lancelot. Ferguson and his patsies will never let legitimate voters matter. That's a question mark. So I don't know if you're asking me to question their motivations or honesty. I'll never defend them. But we will see where we go here. TZ Burton. Glenn, what is up with the A.G. Brown video of him mocking social media posts on his bar association investigation into him? It isn't actually, I saw that video actually, and TZ, thanks for bringing that up. Now that is kind of a wonkish thing. You must read Center Square because they were the ones who talked about it. I think it was smart for him to do that, and I'll tell you why. I watched the whole thing, and I don't know if you went and looked at it, but it's basically a mean tweets video, and there's this type of in fact, we've done this to mock them. We've had Republican legislators, read mean tweets as kind of a funny thing to do at the Roanoke conference, because they get lots of crazy people saying crazy things to them too. And so I actually thought that was pretty smart for Nick Brown to do that. Now, I don't think he was doing it to mock as much to mock his Bar Association investigation. It was mainly him just reading off the mean tweets. At least that's the video that I saw. I heard what the Center Square article wrote about, but I haven't seen a video that relates to that. So it's possible that I'm only looking at a different video. But the mean tweets one, doing stuff like that actually makes you seem a lot more normal when you're laughing at yourself. That seems a little out of character for him, but at least presenting that video out there, it makes you look a lot more normal. So I thought that was actually relatively smart for him to do that. And usually smart because most of these guys just sit back and hide in the darkness. Jack Palder at We the Governed. I had the hardest time voting in Clark County today. I had to read the pamphlet closely and pick out keywords to make a decision. I still felt like the voting for the lesser devils. Yes, you probably did. Depends where you were. The one thing I hope you did in Clark County, though, and it's too late to change now because we just hit 8 o'clock, but I hope you voted for the Republican slate on your charter commission, because that is actually quite important. And we have had conversations here talking about that in the past. I am going to do a couple more questions, and I'll click over to see the results, and then I'll bounce back to questions. So Jason Fisher is a New Yorker. What's your thoughts on New York City elections? Is U-Haul and Penske stock good to invest in? Jason, I don't know if you're a New Yorker. I did live in New York when I was in college, and so that's, despite being a fifth-generation Washingtonian, weirdly enough, I ended up going back to Columbia and went to school there. And that was very strange and substantially out of character, I believe. The truth is, actually, it's the only college I applied to. I was either that or I was going to go to the military, and I actually got into Columbia, so I went back there. So I lived in New York City right before Giuliani was elected. In fact, I brought Giuliani to campus as a college Republican my last year when I was a student at the school, right before he got elected. So I know how bad New York can get. New York's not there yet. If Mondami gets in, this is an opportunity for New York to experience the joys and wonder of an extremely high crime rate that most of the people there probably haven't seen, at least not since the early 90s. I remember my sophomore year, 2,200 people were murdered within 10 miles of my dorm room. You can go look it up. The FBI crime stats are pretty impressive. And back then, I don't think they gamed the crime stats the way they do now. So it was bad, and it was pretty amazing and shocking to me when I first went back there in comparison to living in Washington State. And so that was a big change. My guess is that the difference with Mondami is probably, in addition to him bringing in whatever crazy crew that's going to come in and destroy the city with him, the big risk factor that New York probably has is the exodus of productive people who will leave. And it's mostly having to do with taxes. People will put up with a lot of stuff, actually, to not move, but extremely high taxation of the type that he's talking about imposing is very likely to chase out working class type people. Real rich people can weather the storm, but I would anticipate that I'm assuming he's going to be the guy coming in there. It looked like he was way ahead when I checked it, so I'm sure Mondami is going to be the next mayor. And New York will lose a lot of their tax revenue, so whatever dreams and schemes he had with his utopian dreams, all that'll come crashing down because they just won't have the money for it. And so we'll see where it goes, and he'll get to enjoy the abuse that he inflicts on the community. Sometimes it's funny, though. Electing clowns can lead to reform in the future, so that's always possible, and then we'll see. There's another question here, 206 Stoner. Why didn't the Republican drop out so that Cuomo could win? Cuomo wouldn't have won. When I looked at the numbers here, it wouldn't have mattered. If you added the Republican numbers with Cuomo's numbers, it doesn't look like he would have won anyway. At least that's what I saw. It's possible they've added, I know they weren't totally done counting the last time I looked, so maybe I'm wrong, but it actually looked like Mondami did get a true majority and not just the 45% that the polling was indicated that he'd be at. So no, New York is owning this one, and we'll see what happens with it. Let's see. PH Joy. Glenn, do you think there's any advantage to delivering your ballot to an official ballot box closer to the deadline rather than earlier? Maybe. I mean, the only benefit that you get delivering it to them, I delivered my ballot and my wife's ballot yesterday at the mailbox, or not the mailbox, but at the auditor's office. I hand delivered them. And but that I would have delivered it a little bit earlier, but I was lazy and I waited till towards the end there. But in theory, if you deliver it early, one of the arguments against delivering it early, there's arguments for and against. The argument for delivering it early is that you reduce the amount of junk mail you're going to get because the political campaigns are watching matchbacks, which is the information about who's voted. And if they see somebody's voted, they take you off the mailing list. And if you're a Republican and identified as a Republican, that saves your candidate money, and they can send that equivalent mailer or doorbell or something to somebody else, so therefore the money goes further. That's the theory. The argument against it is that if the other side's doing a good job with matchbacks, and the Democrats usually do, it's really not the Democrats doing it, it's more of the leftists that kind of support them, those other outside organizations. They do a really good job with matchback analysis, and so they're able to see, oh boy, oh no, we got a Republican, looks like they might win, and it would draw more attention, whereas they wouldn't, and to maybe do something to, you know, get the union a doorbell 3 more times in the community that weekend, or change their voting or their campaign to adapt to the changing realities of what's happening on the ground. So one of the arguments is that prevents them from having that kind of a heads up or doing something shady to influence the outcome. So those are the two schools of thought on it. I just made sure that you don't mail it because I think the post office is becoming less and less reliable all the time. All right, guys, so let's just see if before I bounce back to the questions, I'm going to see if I can see what kind of results are posted on the Secretary of State's election. Here, let me refresh that. Let's see what they have. Okay, there's not a lot of people that have put this in. In fact, it's pathetic. So I'm going to switch back to questions. Let me show you what I'm seeing on my screen so you know what I'm talking about. Essentially, if you look down here, off here, it only looks like they've counted 16,000. They reported 16,000 ballots, and that was only in Cowlitz County. Well, that's pathetic. So there's a very small number of ballots that have been checked. Waste of time to really look at that very much. We'll check back in here in a few minutes. So let's get back to your questions because you had a bunch of them, and I'm feeling guilty and obligated to get to as many of those as I can. Let's see. Somebody here said if Seattle has, this is 206 Stoner. So you must be in Seattle. Area code 206. And since you're using a pot leaf as your symbol there, my guess is you're enjoying the legalized marijuana of Washington State. But you said here, if Seattle has a natural disaster, she won't know what to do. And I'm assuming you're referring to your new mayor, and that's absolutely true. She will not. PH Joy, at Discovery Bricks, Glenn doesn't want to run for office, and he can make a lot of difference, perhaps the most, doing what he's doing now. Oh, that's funny. Did somebody up there ask me if I should run for office? As I've said before many times, and I'll continue to say, and I don't think I'm actually changing on this at all, I'm never going to run for public office. And part of the reason for this, and it's pretty straightforward, I hope, but one of the things I've found is that just getting somebody in public office, especially, I think that the state's changing in a way that we're going to have a Republican governor at some point in time. There's a variety of reasons why I say that, and I can get into some of that down the road. But the thing is, imagine that you put a Republican governor in today. What would they do? Well, we don't even have enough capable people to be appointed to any of the positions. I doubt more than a few dozen positions that the governor needs to fill, and he actually has to fill several thousand. One of the key things would be just to have good people in there with the governor to do the hard and important work that actually needs to be done. I'm not as concerned about filling all those positions as I am in downsizing the state and radically downsizing and reorganize the bureaucracy. A lot of people need to be fired. There's whole departments that need to be shut down. All the senior management pretty much needs to go across the board. It's ossified and fossilized in place with some of the worst people we've ever collected in the state. And the grifting operations need to be shut down. A lot of work has to be done. In order to do that, you need to have capable, aggressive, and serious people who've been studying this for a while. And that's me. I'm going to be the hatchet man for the new governor when we get a Republican governor in there. That is the job, dream job for me. Probably not such a dream for the bureaucrats, but definitely something that we need in the state. And it's going to be very difficult for a Republican governor to do that on his own. He couldn't really. You need a team of people around you. So if you're involved in my Doge training classes and you're capable and skilled and know what you're doing, and we do get a Republican governor sooner than people expect, I'm going to be calling on you guys to come and help me because we're going to have a lot of work to do. Let's dig in here. Let's see. Blaming Trump. Yes, that's what Democrats like to do. I'm trying to get down here to some questions, guys. Great commentary. No problem with that. I don't want to miss any of these questions because they're kind of mixed in down here. Let's see. I've been thinking about, okay, here's one. Jason Fisher. How bad is the 2026's Virginia legislative session going to be? Democrats picked up a bunch of seats, and will it east or impact California? I'm assuming is what you mean. I have not. I'll tell you, the one thing I didn't look at was the Virginia legislature results, so I don't know what to say about that. I was doing the same thing probably everyone else was doing, just kind of tracking. I was really more looking at the attorney general race because it looked like after the Democrat attorney general candidate had his, I don't remember his name right now, but he had that story come out about him threatening to kill or fantasizing about killing a Republican and his kids. It did seem to have some blowback and impact under the surveys and the polling, and so that looked like a pretty good pickup. But it looks like that it doesn't look like the Republican won in that seat. And so if the Republican wasn't going to win there, they weren't going to win in the governor's seat. So unfortunately, that's going to be what happened there. I didn't really look at the legislative races out in Virginia after that, so I'll have to look at those pretty soon. Let's see. Seo 2001, not a bad cut. Oh, okay. My haircut. Thank you. I could make it look better. I'm positive you could. Thank you for your opinions and commentary. Good work. All right. Well, you have to tell me where your barbershop shop is up in Linwood, and I'll go up and get a real haircut instead of the cheap one that I'm usually doing right now. Lancelot Dufresne, what fraud systems are in place today for accountability? That's an open-ended question, and I'm assuming you're referencing my SNAP EBT explanation or discussion. So DSHS has a team that's set aside. So here's the theory. I say this is a theory because I had whistleblowers from this department come to me a couple years ago. And there was a big scandal at the time, but of course, I don't think anything got better. And what they do is they assign a team. They train all of their frontline people that when they think there's fraud, they refer the case or the issue that they're looking at up to the team of investigators. And it's the team of investigators that are in this fraud detection department. I'm sorry, there is an official name for it, but it's like Department of Social, Health and Human Services, fraud and accountability, or there's some department name. I don't remember the bureaucratic name right now, but anyway, they have about 30 to 40 people, or they should have that many people there. I'm sure they have a lot less right now because they've historically not filled all those positions. And so these are primarily just the investigators looking at the pre-vetted fraud cases. And the backlog tends to be pretty big. They were talking about trying to get a computer program set up a number of years ago that would clear cases even if they didn't look at them, so that they didn't have to pretend like so that they could pretend like they actually cared and still reduce how much money gets pulled out of the next federal check under the SNAP or EBT system. And one of the things to remember is the feds, on SNAP anyway, the feds cover 50% of the overhead costs associated with administering the program. So the feds provide all the money, so it's federally funded. 50% of the overhead costs, the state only has to match the overhead costs. But the state's always trying to squeeze out everything they can to reduce their costs, and so anything they can do to reduce how much the feds cut, that's what they'll do. Let's see, Terry, I get a voter report card. I still haven't met others that do. Do you know why some would but most don't? When you say report card, I'm not sure if you're referring to the voter's guide. If you're referring to the voter's guide, they should send voter's guides equally out to everybody in the community. There are some differences county to county based on the voter guide, but you should have a voter's guide. A report card's different. If it's a report card, then, and depending on what type of report card you get, you're just on a mailing list where they've identified you as a voter, assuming that you've got a Republican leaning report card, then you've been identified as a Republican voter, and that's probably the Republicans in your community trying to send that to you. If it's a Democrat card, that means they think you're either a swing or a Democrat voter, and they're sending that out to influence who you choose in the election. A lot of people send these out. I'm sorry, you had like 3 different questions related to that. I think it depends on where you live, and I can see what it is. And Mandami just won. Yes, he did. New York is going to be in trouble for a while. That's absolutely true. Let's see. Nighthawk Sim had a question about what's a voter report card, but I think I addressed that there earlier. Let me know if you don't think I did. Let's see. Going down here, Jason. Here's another question. I'm going to jump back on the Secretary of State side again here real quick. Do you think the Vancouver police measure will pass? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I haven't been following that one. Most public safety, or at least most initiatives that are on the ballot, where they're Prop 1s or whatever, but if they're tied to public safety, most of them generally pass, especially in off-year elections like this. So statistically, I would give it a pretty high likelihood of passing. The only thing that would make me think that may not happen is the tax fatigue, which is real. So let's see if there's been any updates. Okay, again, Benton County's got their ballots in. Congratulations, Benton, Columbia, Cowlitz, Franklin, Garfield, Grant, Lewis, Pend Oreille, and San Juan County, and Wahkiakum. Like the smallest counties in the state have put it in. That's only like 1.5% of voter turnout. We probably will have tonight, before we're done, I would guess that we're going to be fairly close to 19% turnout, because that's how many ballots they had already received as of a day or two, as of yesterday, I think. And so if they, usually that means they're going to count all of those by tonight, but we'll see. So, but this isn't even enough really to look at, and none of those are in the critical races that I would probably be initially reporting on. So let's go back to your questions, because you guys had tons of them, and I am not getting to all of them, and I'm trying to. And I will point out one of the things I'm going to look at tonight, once we get enough data in, the two key races that the Republicans in particular are focused on that could have an impact in the state Senate are the 26th Ledge District, which is kind of that Pierce County, Kitsap County area. The district, Michelle Caldeer is a Republican challenging a Democrat in that seat. So it's a pickup if a Republican wins. The other one is going to be in the 5th legislative district, which is in the Issaquah, Enumclaw area, and that's Chad Magendaw is running there. Between the two, he's a Republican, so that'd be a pickup if the Republican wins. Remember, that was a seat held by a Democrat until recently, and Chad had actually been a legislator in that district, so he's already familiar with it, and he should be a fairly familiar name. He was second in the primary to the incumbent, but the original incumbent, the reason why the seat's open, he went out for a run in Issaquah, and they have these trails there. I used to run on these too myself. Anyway, he had a heart attack and died on the trail, the Democrat did, and that's why it was open. It became an open seat this year. The Democrat was appointed, and that's who Chad's running against. And so if he prevails, that would be a Republican pickup there as well. The benefit if we do get one or both of those seats is just that the Republicans would have the ability to stave off some of the bad Democrat ideas. They're all bad pretty much. So we'll see what happens, but those are the two that I would look at initially. Let's see. Again, people keep talking about this voter report card. I keep seeing that in there. Voter report cards, if that's what they're calling them, are put out by not a government entity. They're put out by typically third-party entities that are encouraging you to vote because they believe that you agree with them, and they're basic. If this is one of those mailers that comes out and says you've only voted, or you voted, you've got an A+ and you're voting, or you haven't voted enough, please encourage you to vote. It's just a way to generate some attention so you actually vote. It's not a real report card and nobody really cares, but they can drive, it can motivate some people to do. No, this is Terry asking again, do only political donors get voter report cards? No, they don't. It's not just donors, although that's one way to identify potentially what party you're affiliated with. Sometimes you'll get them with just because you're a regular voter or you're an infrequent voter, and what they're trying to do is motivate you to become a frequent voter. And they've identified and they believe, if you're watching the show, you probably are a conservative voter, and so they're trying to get you to vote. They want to encourage you to vote because they feel like you'll vote for the person that they're supporting. So I'm sorry I didn't quite understand, I think, your original question, because I was I was misinterpreting a report card probably in that scenario, meaning that it would apply to, candidate assessed reports that get put out all the time. So that's what I thought you were referring to there. Next question here. By the way, Terry, you've asked a ton of questions on this, so I'm not going to repeat them all here because it's essentially the same question. Good issue to discuss tonight. I hope I addressed it, and if I didn't, go ahead and throw another one in there. Please do at We the Govern, and I can pick it out easier as a question. PH Joy, I don't want to deliver it early because I don't want to tip off the folks who might hustle to try and tip the scales, whether legally or illegally. Okay, that's fine. Just don't forget to get it in. Terry, you put this question in here a bunch, and it's taken me a while to now catch up to you, but hopefully I've answered that question enough. I've got a lot more questions to go, which I'm not going to get to probably, but I'm going to get to as many of them as I can. Let's see. Somebody get a vote refused. So I just saw this in here. PH Joy, how did his vote get refused at Terry? Real quick about this. Let me look in here. Okay, I'm going to have to go back. Sorry, I just passed over some questions and I didn't mean to. But if you're asking about why somebody's vote would be rejected or not counted or something like that, in that case, that would be an official communication you probably do have from your local auditor's office. Usually, they only reject ballots for a couple of reasons. But the main reason is signature. You have no signature at all, or your signature doesn't match whatever they have on file. Now, I know that the signature verification system is garbage, and a lot of times it's garbage in, garbage out to some extent. How they manage it, you don't have to get into that with me. I do understand it. There's some variation county to county and based on training of the employees. And even with the clear ballot system that pulls up those images, there's a lot of questions out there about it. But most counties at least find some reason to reject a handful of ballots in their community that come in and they say, hey, there's no signature, which is a perfectly valid reason. Please come in and sign your ballot. Or you have to sign a form to send it in to them, and that might be what you would get. Or it would be rejected because they say, hey, the signature doesn't match. You have to come in and correctly re-sign it or send in a letter that has it re-signed. And those are usually the reasons why they might not count it. TZ Burton, sorry, I had skipped over this question a little bit earlier, and you actually did the right thing where it says, that we the govern, easy for me to find. Since the Democrats spent all of the tax increase money already and King County's broke and the state is still short cash, are the Democrats going to pass an income tax next session? The answer to that is no, they aren't, probably because they don't want to deal with that kind of a fight. This isn't the fight they want to have as they're going into an election cycle, and it really isn't. They can say this. They could do like a... I could see somebody proposing it. I don't actually see it getting through the legislative session because usually we're coming up on a short session, the 60-day session, not the 90-day session, and that'll start next January. Most of the time, candidates are worried and they want to get back and run for office, and they don't want to stay in Olympia any longer. They have to. And so they're going to have to do the revised budget for sure. That's going to be a legal requirement. Outside of that, they don't have to do really a lot more when they're in there. And so this is a bunch of virtue signaling bills that they don't even care if they get through, that just lets them have something to campaign on when they hit November, and they're going to reduce usually the drama and the chaos and attention on any dramatic bills mostly that actually get through the legislative session, because if there's blowback, they don't want to deal with that in the campaign. That's generally what they do. There's going to be budget cuts in Washington State. There is a pretty big rainy day fund. I'm waiting to see if the state decides to raid the rainy day fund, which they could, and they could probably keep some of the gravy train going a little bit longer. The CCA kickback scheme, which is the Climate Commitment Act gas tax slush fund that they have, that's still going strong. So there's a lot of people you can pay off with that, and the Democrats are doing that as we speak. Coming out of the Department of Commerce, of course. Total terrible scam. I mean, it really is. It'd be the first thing I'd end if I was governor in there, like instantly. And then probably they're just going to have to start making cuts. They don't really have a choice. So it was nice. Probably while the gravy train was going and they were rolling forward, but now the cuts will have to happen, and they don't really have much choice now. Terry, I'm bouncing in here because you put a lot of questions here, but if it was a signature, hopefully I described it when I discussed that earlier. And let me check my time here. I'm going to go back and check in 5 minutes, see what the Secretary of State has to say. How likely, this is Mary, How likely is it to recall Bob Ferguson? Can we, and is there enough momentum to do so? Well, the challenge with a recall, especially a statewide office, is the significance of the first thing you have to do is get through the court system in the recall process. And I've done these before, both successfully and unsuccessfully. Most of them are unsuccessful. It's you have misfeasance, malfeasance, and violation of oath of office. I've never actually seen anybody recalled under oath of office violations. So just because you can come up with a whole list of things that Bob Ferguson violated in his oath of office, I've never seen a judge uphold that. Generally, I haven't. Misfeasance and malfeasance is where you're going to find it, and especially in malfeasance. And so you have to identify something. And keep in mind, even if and there's no doubt he was an egregious attorney general, anything that he did back then as attorney general, I don't believe that carries into the new office. So you can only kick him out for what he's done in this office. And he's only been there for 9 months, since January, essentially. So I think it'd be very difficult to successfully craft a recall effort on Bob Ferguson right now. I think you could craft a recall effort on Chris Reichtel, who's the OSPI. That one, you'd have a pretty good chance of getting through, at least getting through the legal side of it. Let's just say you survive and it's going to be 2 legal court cases. You'll have a local court that ends up hearing it, and they probably say no, and then you have to appeal it to the Supreme Court. Or they'll say yes, and you appeal it to the Supreme Court. And ultimately, on all recalls, the Supreme Court makes a final decision. Once they make that decision, then the clock starts ticking, assuming they say yes. And you have a finite window of time to gather signatures. I actually don't remember that time frame right now, but and you have to gather a massive number of signatures. It's the equivalent of running a large initiative. Just to give you now, recalls, it's generally easier to collect the signatures, so maybe it would cost less, but you're still probably having to budget about $1 million for running a serious campaign to do a recall election. Beyond that's in addition to whatever costs that you incur in the legal court process. We have people sometimes, I think, that jump on this recall bandwagon, probably because they're from California and they think it operates the same way down up here, and it doesn't. It's a little bit harder to get through it, and I fear sometimes they use a recall because everybody's pissed, and so they say, sure, I want to recall them, but you divert a massive amount of energy into something that's unlikely to go anywhere. There are times for recalls. I actually think that a well-financed and well-planned recall of Chris Reichtel could be successful. That's the one I would work on before I would do Ferguson. And believe me, Ferguson's not my friend. Yeah, if you've paid any attention to the stuff I've been doing over the last few years, he definitely hates me. And I would be the first there to run a recall on him if I thought that path forward was set up. I don't think it quite is yet. It could change, and it very, very well could change pretty soon, but right now I don't think it is. Let's see. Governor and lieutenant governor got flipped by large margins. This is from McCannier, I guess. And I'm assuming you're referring to Virginia in that case. And it wasn't so much flipped as that, remember, they have term limits, sorry. They have term limits, and so the seat was flipped as far as party control goes, but not as far as the incumbent being kicked out. It's just how it goes. Let's see. Eric D., I don't live there anymore. I live in North Dakota now, but please do keep your work going as I pray the state can get rid of mail-in voting at We the Govern. Yes, I do too. Thank you for the support. Love North Dakota, and I've been out there. I've trained some activists out there as they're uncovering corruption in that state too. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting. Let's see. Jason, what's your thoughts? Minneapolis Captain Phillips nemesis winning Maersk, Alabama cargo ship hijackers. Oh, yeah, the guy out in Minneapolis. I don't know. I mean, it looks like they need to discover, they want to send that city down just a bit deeper and see what happens. This is Chop It Up Barbershop in Linwood. First name Frank. Okay, great, Frank. Chop It Up Barbershop. That should be easy to remember. Thank you for letting me know. Let's see. What is your personal prediction of this outcome? Which outcome? This is Lancelot. Yes, a question there. It's all in caps, and I don't know what outcome you're talking about. let's see. And be a night. So let me go down, trying to get questions here. I'm going to share this with you so you can kind of see. So there's a lot of these questions that I'm having to go through here, guys. So just so you know, you can see how it's quite a bit easier for me to see if you do the @We the Govern. Just so you know, I'm not trying to skip over anybody's questions. Some people were very sensitive about that, but I'm not. It's just simply that I have to try to find it in here, and maybe I have my font on a little bit too small. Let's see. PH Joy, I like to check to see if my vote was counted using the current ballot stub personally, but I always wonder if it was counted accurately. Yeah, there's no way to verify that. Would it betray confidentiality if it showed details? Well, this has been an argument that we've had for a while about optimal transparency of ballots. I mean, the one benefit, and it's the only one that you get with mail-in voting, is that no matter what, there's a paper record. And I say that because there's in-person voting with electronic machines, which I think is absolutely the worst system you can make. But mail-in voting is the second worst, right behind that, because the electronic voting with machines, there's absolutely really no effective way to go back and audit it. Maybe if they had like a full paper trail printout, but you can't verify that what they did in the machine is what came out on the printout. And so that was one of the concerns I've always had with that type of system. We'll just see what happens. But it's always been a goal of mine that if we're going to have dumb voting with mail-in voting, that at least make it so there's a barcode system that you could use to go back and audit and verify that your ballot that they counted is the same as the one you sent into them. And that's always been a concern of ours. We brought that up forever, mainly because of the lack of chain of custody issues. Very difficult to do that if you had to do it all in one day and count everything on one day and voting was on one day. Then it's very difficult to do that type of fraud. But it's a little bit easier in this case. Let's see. Mary, you asked again, how likely is it to recall Bob Ferguson? Can we? And is there enough momentum to do so? Or I just repeated your question myself. Let's see. I will say recalls do work sometimes, but I do not believe that they are the panacea and the solution and utopia that people sometimes think they are. I wonder why we can't verify that our ballot counted as we voted specifically, as opposed to just saying they received it. I want to know if they recorded my votes accurately. Of course, that's what I want too, and that would be a good transparency change. We've had some suggestions policy-wise on how to do that, and that just takes a little bit of work to do that. Let's see. Somebody in there, funny, Miriam Known, we don't want Denny Heck either. Well, yeah, that's the lieutenant governor would probably take the place of a governor. That's actually what would happen. And Denny Heck is lieutenant governor right now. I do say, though, Denny Heck would be better than Bob Ferguson in there. He's certainly much more rational. Disagree with Denny Heck on everything, just like I probably do with almost all the state office holders. Not completely. I do agree with a couple policy positions that Steve Hobbs has. He's opposed to ranked choice voting, as am I, and he's opposed to electronic voting, as am I. So at least we share common ground on those issues. Don't agree with him on a lot of other things. So there are some stuff out there that you can find common ground on. And Denny Heck would be just a little bit more sane, but than Bob Ferguson, most likely. Let's see. Lancelot Dufresne, systems protect themselves. What is the antidote? Well, replace the system sometimes. That would be a good antidote. And let's get in here. And sorry about this. I kind of lost track here trying to answer these questions, which is what I'm supposed to do in an Ask Me Anything video. Let's go back and look at the see if our Secretary of State's caught up with some more ballots in here. Okay, now we're up to enough. Let's look at what this looks like, and I will show you what I am looking at on my screen. So if you look down here, I'm looking at all these counties. For some reason, Ferry County hasn't put their stuff in. Naughty, Ferry County. Klickitat, you're missing. Lincoln and Okanagan. These are relatively small counties. Stevens, which actually is a little bit bigger. And Snohomish, which is huge. So I can't believe Snohomish hasn't put theirs in there yet. And we're already at 18.5% turnout. Nevertheless, let's just go look at the counties that matter for the two legislative seats. Let's go see. So this is what I would do. I would go in here and I would look at the 5th Ledge District. Mogan-Dawes is 40, so it's 45% to 54%. So he's not doing well there, and odds are probably substantially against his ability to close that gap. It's about a 2,000 vote gap. It's possible because the vote turnout in there is small enough still, and they have a lot more ballots to come in. But at this point in time, Chad's in a tough spot coming from behind that far. So that would be a difficult pickup, and that doesn't look good for the Republicans in the 5th Ledge District. Let's look closer down here to the 26th, and it is closer here. And this is about 1,800 vote difference, and 47% with Michelle Caldier. So that also doesn't look good. So I would say neither Republican looks great in the 2 Senate races that clearly were the 2 races that the Republicans wanted to win that would have made a difference in the legislature. We'll have to look for one more matchback count. If you watch this number, 47%, if at the end of the day tomorrow it moves up to 48% or something like that, then everything changes. So something's very different in a good way. If it goes down or stays the same after about a day or 2 of counting, that would be really difficult and tough. Let's look for 8201. And unfortunately, it looks like the healthcare fund is going to be turned into a lottery for insiders as they go to invest those funds into the stock market. So I did vote against this. I thought it was a bad idea. But at this point in time, unless Snohomish comes in with a large vote no, which I would be surprised, that one definitely looks like it's going to pass. The 62% to 46% doesn't match. The math there doesn't make sense. So that is weird. And I'm going to screen grab that guy. That's a strange image to actually see. So that's somebody screwed up at the Secretary of State's office right there, because there's no world where you should have a 62% to 46%. If it was 52 to 46, that makes a little bit more sense. But so nobody's ever accused bureaucrats to be very attached to math or reality, but that definitely is something that's that's not good actually. Voter turnout. So and I have seen them screw that up once before, by the way. So I'm gonna withhold my complete scorn until I figure out what happened there. Down here, let's look at Thurston. So this is where I live. And I want to see, and this is what you can do, by the way, with whatever county you live in. And you can go down here and see what's going on. Now, this is a close race. I think you can see here, I'm looking at the 2 port commissioner races. And so there was 2 good guys running against 2 bad guys. And the good guys right now are leading, but not by a lot. Actually, they aren't. One's leading. Bob Ayala, who I disagree with in many things, but he's better than Jerry Tumpas. And Anthony Hempstead is barely behind this Craig Unsold, who it would be better if Anthony wins, but that's so close. There's no way you can call that election. You're only looking at a 500 vote margin, and there's going to be thousands of more votes coming in on that. So we'll see what happens there. Charles Beck, a friend of mine running for Lacey, does not look good for him right now. So it would have to be unusual voter turnout numbers to come by after that. Stedman in the city council. Again, a guy I've disagreed with a lot. This is Lacey City Council running against a crazy leftist. So Lacey's going to be in trouble up there, it looks like. Clark Gilman down here, this is Olympia City Council. He's a guy that I got in trouble a little while ago for his violations of campaign finance laws. I think Wendy would have been a much better choice there, but she does not look like she's going to win either. Let's see. There were some closer races there. I want to see if there's a school board race. I was hoping to see, but that doesn't look good. If those are the races, I think the Olympia School Board will not be as good as I was hoping they would be. So generally, this is what I would do. So whatever county you have, you go through and you look at those, and then you see where you're at. There was I wanted to see if I could catch this, and you see with these local elections, there's a lot of stuff out here. a lot of these local races. Sorry, this isn't a great video if I'm not explaining things to you, and I'm kind of moving fast here, but Loretta Burns, who I really like, and Ryan Smith, who I really like, both of whom would have been much better and in Loretta's case, she would have been a really good North Thurston public school director. She has not done well. Ryan Smith, who would be a phenomenal school board director in Olympia, he would probably be one of the best they'd ever had. But the Olympia school districts really, really wants to destroy themselves. So it's sad because he's actually way more qualified than anybody else on that board. But it looks like he did not do well, and I'm very sorry about that because Ryan's a great guy. Let me look down here. There was some, I thought there were some initiatives I was going to look for. There was maybe I went through it too fast. Sorry guys, I'm not trying to like totally blow by everybody here, but I wanted to show, here it is, okay, at the end. So this is interesting to me a little bit more because here's where we get some policy impacts. And so notice the city of Olympia voted for crazies and clowns, but they rejected a terrible idea about fair wages and fair schedules, which was a way to simply jack up the cost of running a business or living in Olympia. And despite the left really supported this, and it's failing, which is impressive. Yelm Community Schools looks like they lost their replacement education levy for the 4th year in a row. And that's probably good for the taxpayers out there. Not so good for the Yelm School District, but I'm going to tell you, with the property taxes having gone up, the Yelm School District, that area, they've saved themselves now 38% of their property taxes by rejecting that levy. And the Yelm School District went too woke, and I think that really hurt them quite a bit. There was a fire protection district that did pass. So a couple of fire district protections passed, but the Yelm one and the Olympia one failed, and that's interesting to me. All right, if you go and live, let's see if has Snohomish County come in yet. So I'm sorry, I'm leaving up. This is how I'd be looking at this, and I don't want to bore you with digging into all the results all over the place, but this is what I'd be looking at if I was looking at this election. Snohomish County has still not done it. No, I don't know what Snohomish County's doing up there because it is 8:40 and they still don't have their results and they're one of the largest counties. So there's a lot of things you can learn as you dig into this. I'm going to look maybe at King County here in a second and see if I can see something that would be interesting. Oh, this is terrible. Brian Yamby in the Council 5 in Pierce County. This is the guy that steals money using his credit card thing. I wrote an article about that a while ago when we were doing some Doge Washington stuff. We should have gotten into that one earlier, but Brian Yamby is definitely an egregiously unqualified and unskilled person to be on the Pierce County Council, and Terry Weiss is really good. So that's unfortunate to see that result right now. And I don't know that would close. It'd be very difficult to see that one close. Whereas like this position, the Charter Review Commission, you can't even tell who's going to win that one. It's within just a handful of votes. Don't say your vote doesn't count. So if you live in Clark County, your Clark County Charter Review Commission, the Republicans generally did a pretty good job pushing that out. Pierce County had one here too. Sharon Hannock, a good friend of mine, looks like she won. I'm not going to go through all the Charter Review. I'm kind of wanting to go back to King now and check on this one. So let's look at King County. And this is how, again, the link that I have at the top of the comment section, if you want to look at the stuff yourself, this is how you do it, is you go in there and you pull these things up. And I don't know if I'm like, a lot of people are logged on right now, so I don't know if I'm boring people too much, but so what I would do is I'd look at King County, the Heart of Darkness, and let's see what's actually going on with this. There were a couple races in here I just wanted to look at. So Kevin Schilling looks good. He's leading anyway for the state representative position. He is a Democrat. It's two Democrats against each other, but I think he was the more sane one. I think that was the argument. So that's just kind of interesting. Janice Zahn, unfortunately, she is going to be going back. Let's see. There it is, King County Executive. Wow. Well, it looks like Claudia Balducci may lose this Game Zahilia. I really thought Claudia would be able to pull that off, but she is in. Of course, it's still fairly close to the volume of votes, but that looks doesn't look great. Now, neither one of them is a good person for King County, but you might get the crazier person in King County, which is an interesting and probably negative outcome there. I like Peter Kwan, and so this was the other one I was going to look at. Stephanie Fain looks like she's polling ahead right now. Peter Kwan was an amazing doorbell. I've known him on the SeaTac City Council for a long time. I consider him a friend. He's a good guy on this budget stuff. Probably this will end up being one of the more conservative seats, probably regardless, but I would have liked to have seen her in there. Pete Von Reichbauer is kind of the other Republican-ish person on the King County Council, although Reagan Dunn is the only consistent one that's been voting against tax increases and paying attention to stuff. So that's where the King County Council looks. That was something I wanted to look at. I am interested. I mean, those things interest me a little bit. Let's see if I can refresh this one again. If there's anything else, let's see if Snohomish is still not got. Snohomish, look at this. There's 541,000 registered voters in Snohomish. It's I believe. Let me just see if it's true with Pierce. Yeah, Pierce is ahead of them still, but Pierce has almost 600,000, but Snohomish is right behind him. And to have that county with no ballots in yet, and the potential to actually make a pretty big impact on some of the other some of those races is a bit of a surprise. So we will see. And let's go back to your questions, because I bet you guys have some. I don't want to put people to sleep with my surfing on the election results, except now I need to make sure I find these. There it is. And let's make that big. And there are a lot of questions. Yeah, there's quite a few. Sorry. Oof. I'm going to see if I can get through as many of these questions as I can and hopefully answer some of them. Seiyu, 2001, shouldn't we focus on getting rid of the mail-in voting before anything else? Yes, you should, but unfortunately it won't happen as quick as we want it to. So you still have to vote sometimes, and you still have to run candidates who don't need drool cups to function in public, and you actually have to run real campaigns that are modern, realistic, and well-financed. And plan ahead. Don't wait till the last minute, and then you'd be in much better shape, I think, when we're running for these positions. It doesn't help, though, if the turnout's so low that everybody that voted for Trump stayed home. If everybody who voted for Trump had actually showed up in the primary and voted for Republicans, then Republicans would have won every seat because of this incredibly low turnout. But that's not what I see happening right now. Now, maybe there's more. There will be more ballots coming in. To be fair, it's a fairly sizable chunk that'll have to be counted. So some of these close election results are going to shift, and there will be differences. Ed Birch, make perjury punishable again. No one can take elected office without an oath of office, but unto whom is it spoken? Ed, that's a good question. I know when I was elected, the school board, you would go in and they would do a swearing ceremony, and it's usually a judge that actually takes the statement, similar to if you were in a courtroom, really. And it's, I don't know. I mean, some people should take it seriously. You sign an oath at the end usually, and I remember I did. And you're swearing to uphold the federal Constitution and the state Constitution, and that's essentially what you're really swearing to there. But it just oath of office and the definition of an oath of office in a recall situation, which is where this term has come up, at least in the series of questions that we've had here tonight. Those just tend not to be. I've not seen those stick on a recall petition, regardless of the fact that the law says that's one of the three categories that you can use for recalling somebody. I do a video that it's been years, but I did a video about misfeasance, malfeasance, and was it no-feasance? Misfeasance, malfeasance. Anyway, I outlined what the differences are. I have to go back and look at my own video. And so you could tell the distinction between them. And it is important. The legal distinction is pretty significant. Most successful recall efforts that I've been involved in the past dealt with malfeasance activity. And if you remember, Kshama Sawant when she was on the Seattle City Council. And the former mayor at the time, it's funny how I don't remember her name. Boy, when they leave, you just don't care anymore. But she was a Summer to Love gal who helped organize or let CHOP metastasize on her watch. Anyway, those two people went at each other like crazy, and Kshama Sawant tried to run a recall petition against the mayor at the time of Seattle, who then in turn was an attorney with a big family filled with attorneys and was pissed, and a longtime old Democrat family. She went after Kshama Sawant and filed a recall petition on her. And that's actually the model recall petition structure that I usually recommend people that are just starting down this road look at how they documented and wrote about the approved justifications for the recall petition against Kshama Sawant. I think they originally had 5, and then 3 of them made it through the courts and were upheld by the Supreme Court as a legitimate justification for a recall petition on Kshama Sawant, which they did collect the signatures on, which, by the way, back then that wasn't easy because Kshama Sawant sent out the Red Guards and they were attacking signature gatherers, and it was the typical lefty violence that you see today every time you do something they don't like. And they still got it through, got it on the ballot, and Kshama Sawant barely survived it. Now, I will point out that she bailed out, but now it's making me wonder, she was running against Adam Smith and for Congress. I didn't hear a lot about that race, and be curious to go back and look at that in a few seconds. Maybe that's one of the last things I look at before we shut this down. It's 8:50 right now. I'll go for about 10 more minutes to see how many questions that I can get here. Let's see. I hope to hear more about the policies aiming at helping with voting transparency and accountability in regards to seeing how they counted our votes at We the Governed. Absolutely. But I'm going to tell you the federal lawsuit against the state of Washington that has been set up by Secretary of State's refusal to provide the 2 columns of data to the feds and use them so the feds can actually verify what's actually going on with the voter rolls in Washington. That lawsuit will probably do more to move things in the right direction. And I also think that you're going to see some other motion, just looking at some of the movement that Harmeet Dillon's doing and others about election integrity and reform. There's probably quite a bit that I think we will go on and expose. Let's see. What do you see happening eventually as the fraud and waste is discovered and reported? How soon do you think something on that will happen? And this is a good question. This is Jet H. That's a question that he asked. And it really depends on what type of fraud that we're talking about. If it's fraud and you can nail it down to an individual, you may have criminal prosecutions in some of those cases. Typically, I don't see the feds jumping in and into this unless it's more than 100,000 or so, judging from the cases that they've prosecuted already this year, which like the clerk treasurer out of Morton and the guy that was working in one of the retirement funds in Tumwater. Like those were cases that the feds stepped in and took over, but they were 6-figure type cases. And I think they'll jump in on those. They don't usually jump on the smaller ones. A lot of those they'll kick up to the prosecutors. And as you know, our prosecutors don't really seem to do much. I will say the Morton case is disappointing because here she steals almost $1 million from the city of Morton, and she doesn't even get any jail time. 5 years probation, and trying to pay it back. That was absurd. I did bring that video up. For the waste, the benefit of doing that is it depends which jurisdiction you're looking at with the waste. If you're looking at a small jurisdiction where Republicans have a chance or might be taking over the control of the city or the county, you can use the waste you identify as they need to cut their budgets, and they almost all have to now, and or will soon. And the stuff you're providing them is better than whatever dumb cuts the bureaucrats are proposing to those elected officials. And so you've done a lot of the work by identifying this waste and how they're squandering the money on magazine subscriptions and trips to Vegas and membership dues to the Association of Cities and Counties, or whatever waste that's going on, the grant grifting, kickback schemes, all kinds of stuff. And as you expose that, dumb contracts with software that they don't use or vendors that they don't use, whatever, you got all kinds of opportunities. It's amazing how much that stuff adds up. And so when they have an emergency in December of next year and they say, oh my God, we're going to have to cut police, you can walk in with millions of dollars of other cuts that they can do instead. Oftentimes, if you have sane people, good people in elected office, they'll appreciate that because you've done the work that they're lazy and bad staff wouldn't do. So for that, it's really good because it lets you focus on the right things to cut instead of the public safety, which is what bureaucrats will always try to cut. The reason why bureaucrats try to cut public safety first is that gives people will push back against that because they want the law enforcement to be out there. They want the bad guys to be arrested. And so what they'll do is they'll leverage that anger about cutting public safety into a tax proposal. So that's usually what they try to do. When you provide the alternative of here's a bunch of things you can cut to get to what you need to, that takes all the wind out of their sails and it gives the politicians an opportunity to make those cuts. So that's good. When it comes to state level, similar opportunities tend to exist, but the Democrats right now in Washington State are on quite a bit of control. So anyway, we'll see what happens, but it does matter, and exposing that more, especially if it's big enough that the feds get involved, I think is pretty important. Let's see. Okanagan is quite a trip. It's beautiful. The drive is. God bless you all. Yes, if you're driving out to Okanagan, that is a bit depending on where you're coming from. Yeah. The math, okay. Remember that one I showed you, the ridiculous, where they're saying 60, it didn't make any sense. The math should be 57 versus 42%. Yeah, that's funny. I saved that photo. Jet Vet, what are the chances the state Supreme Court will do the right thing regarding the natural gas ban initiative? I want to buy a house with natural gas. Well, they may not be able to prevent you from doing that anyway, but I don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do. When in doubt, with a Washington State Supreme Court, I usually presume they'll always do the corrupt thing, but you never know. And I have seen them sometimes accidentally happen. Lancelot Dufresne, numbers are created by the creators. Yeah, that's a weird one, by the way. I'm very happy I took that photo, and I'm very happy you had a chance to see me take that photo, because those are the types of things that I stumble on and I want to dig into. So, Glenn, do you figure that allowing investments will encourage too much favoring of private companies? No, here's my concern about this. First of all, Washington State generally is egregiously incompetent with almost everything that you give them when it comes to money. And the bureaucrats who run it can't help themselves. Corruption is just natural, and self-dealing and insider dealing is just part of the cards. And so what happens is now you get the slush fund, and you say, oh, well, we're going to invest in the stock market. And they'll initially have what looks like a resume of good people there. But then the corrupt ones will say, wait a second, we can come in and redirect this into our green scheme scams, or the Bob Ferguson secret companies run on the side. I mean, who knows? And so what they'll do is they'll redirect the money that way, and inevitably, because those are bad companies or bad ideas, they'll collapse and lose a bunch of money. If you looked at the California pension plan recently, they had set aside their ESG virtue signaling fund and then lost a ton of money putting it into lefty business projects that failed and lost a lot of money. And so the same thing will happen in Washington State, even if it doesn't happen the first couple of years. Stupidity, incompetence, corruption, it just inevitably goes like water downhill. And even if they put the initial facade on so they could justify voters approving it, they'll shift into that right away. And that's what I would expect to happen. And sorry, guys, I forgot to turn my phone off here. Usually I try to do that. Sorry about that. Let me just turn that off. And I'm surprised it didn't go off earlier. I probably have everybody in the world calling about elections. That's always what happens. Let's see. This is Ed Birch. Which is more powerful, the right to vote justly or the wrong to do otherwise? I don't know what you're saying. That I don't know what question you're actually asking me there, so I can't answer it. I actually don't even know what you're saying. Let's see. And this is a name, DB Walks by Faith. Ann Davidson, Seattle attorney, is behind. How bad is her opponent? Well, her opponent's just completely insane. So that won't be good for Seattle. Ann Davidson at least was sane, although I disagree with several things that she did there towards the end. I don't know why she thought she was going to somehow virtue signal her way into the hearts of some Democrats there. And once they decide to go crazy, they just go crazy. And so Ann Davidson got into office when she was elected in for the Seattle Attorney's Office because she actually wanted to put criminals in jail. jail. Now, clearly, they did hold her back quite a bit, but I would expect with the crazy person now that if Ann Davidson ends up losing, that the crazy person won't be doing that. And Nighthawk Sim looks like Prop 50 passed in California. No surprise. That won't be so good. Matt M, thanks for the live stream. Much appreciated. And I think that's about as far as I'm going to go because I'm already hitting almost 9 o'clock. So let me just close with just a couple other quick comments here. Guys, I'll try to do something to summarize some of this in a future video. I realize I've been on for an hour and a half, and that's probably way too long, but it looks like about 2,300 of you jumped on for election night, so I must have been not too boring. I want to dig into some of these numbers. It's very difficult for me to do that live. There's going to be some races I want to talk about a little bit more moving forward and explore. I don't know if I'm going to have time to record another video tonight. Normally that's what I would do, but I'm getting a late start, and so I may end up just having to come back and here sometime this next week and see it sometime before the end of the week, I should say, and get a couple more videos done. If you have a gap in my video streams for a while, it's because I just simply ran out of time today, and I'm doing a Doge training class and some other things, so I'm gonna have to circle back around. Maybe I can get in here on Friday. But there's definitely we definitely need to get out there and explore some of these results. And again, planning ahead is important. And I do think the election reform efforts are important. And again, all the people that voted for Trump that didn't bother to show up, which looks like that was about 80% of them, it makes it hard to win local elections when people think that they vote for one guy and then they go away thinking everything's solved. You need other people kind of filling in at these lower levels. It's very difficult to make any significant reform when you don't have that. So anyway, that's where we're at right now. Guys, thank you so much for logging on. I know this was a long live stream, and hopefully it's worked out fairly well for you and you felt like it wasn't, it was a useful exercise for you. And I'm sorry that it probably prevented me from getting some other filming done tonight, but I think it was important. It is election night, and even if it's not for your election, there were some important races, most of which did not go well. And so we'll have to get into some of those details a little bit more in a future video. So hope all is well for the rest of you. And we got a lot of work to do. Nothing really changes the fact that we have a lot of work to do, and it really wouldn't matter, but it's always better if you feel like you're coming off some wins to do that work. But sometimes what I find is just like with the defeat in 2020 when Trump lost, you come back stronger later if you start working now to build that ground game so that you have that ability. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you soon. And I'm definitely planning to do a live stream next week. Should be back at a regular time on Tuesday. Hope all's well. Enjoy the evening.